If you found something you loved, what would you be willing to sacrifice in order to have it? And this is a question I've had to answer for myself repeatedly throughout my life. And when I went into the school system, I had dyslexia, and I went immediately into the special ed classes. And it was weird, and I felt isolated and alone, and the other kids sure had a way of making me feel like that too. But as I went through the school system, and everyone was graduating, going off to college, I realized that wasn't in the cards for me, and some people just had a plan, and I didn't even have that. And I considered, could you even get a job, and could you even work at McDonald's? And I didn't think I could. I didn't think I could read the menu. I didn't think I could operate the register. And at that point, I probably couldn't read or write. And it sent me into this very dark, destructive, it was an ugly place. But somewhere in there, I did find photography. And I said, I want to go to the local community college and take a class. So once I got in that dark room and I started developing that film and working in there, I was working with my hands, and I'm like, I'm good at this. I can do this. This is great. And it was cool. And more importantly, when I laid out those images and I started looking at them, I realized this is a very powerful means of communication. And imagine being 24 years old and being able to speak for the first time. That's what I felt. And I took that camera and I focused it on everything I loved. And I loved action sports. I loved snowboarding. I started making pictures of my friends. And immediately after doing so, I started getting published, and I was selling ads, and the whole thing started moving so fast. And next thing you know, I'm sitting in this beautiful 2-story penthouse in downtown Los Angeles. And that dark feeling started coming over me again. And what had changed is photography that was an analog process, and now we're in the midst of the digital era. And in this era, it's acceptable to manipulate images and change them and alter them. And I started thinking about it, and I was like, people are getting elected into office based off this same principle. They can lie and manipulate, and I don't even know what the news is saying, who's right, what's real. And I was like, I'm contributing to that. And I don't want my voice, the thing that I held so precious, to be the voice of a liar. And I felt like my whole legacy would be a lie. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to go back and shoot film, but at this point, a lot of the companies had gone out of business, or they had stopped making the film I loved. And I found this process called wet plate collodion. And the thing that grabbed me about it was it required you to make your own film by hand. And I was like, oh, this is neat. If I make this, they can all go out of business, and I will have this. No one can take this from me. And I ordered all this chemistry stuff offline and these chemicals, and I made this laboratory in my kitchen. It was a makeshift laboratory. And I actually made the film. And soon after doing that, I made these little glass plates. And they're about 8 by 10 inches, and they're called ambrotypes. And they are handmade, so they have these flaws in them, but I started looking deeper into the portrait, and there was imperfections. Maybe there was a pimple or a wrinkle, or these things that make us beautiful, the things that make us individuals. And it's like, why are we stripping these things from ourselves? Why are we doing this? And I kept imagining hundreds of pictures going out daily and young kids looking at this, and how can I live up to something that doesn't even exist and it isn't real? And I was a small piece behind that. No, I wasn't happy with that at all. And from there, I was holding the answer in my hand, and this plate had everything that I wanted, but I wanted it big on my wall. I wanted to see it big, but I didn't want a copy. I wanted the plate. And I had these giant windows, and I was looking out, and they're about 5 by 7 feet, and I'm like, I want to make a plate like that. So I started looking around, and I was wondering, do lenses like this exist? Are they around? And I found out they're very hard to come by. Next thing you know, one's sitting on my table. And then I'm like, I need a camera. And I was talking to my dad, and he's like, you're going to need a big truck, because whatever you're going to build is going to be huge. And I was like, well, we were talking, maybe I can make the whole truck. It could be a box van, could be the camera, and I could put the lens on the back. And he called me back. He's like, I found you a truck in Sacramento at an auction. And I flew up there, sight unseen, bought it. Okay, I got the truck. And then it dawned on me, and I was like, well, you don't know much about wet plate. And I decided, you better take a workshop. And I met a man named Will Dunaway, and he teaches it. And after the workshop, I sat down with him, and I described to him what I wanted to do. And he said, Ian, what you're describing to me is impossible. And why in 200 years of photography has no one ever even been able to come close to this? And he wasn't trying to hurt my feelings. He was very nice. But I took that home with me, and I thought about it, and I was like, you know what? I'm not doing these jobs anymore. And I was looking around, I'm like, I'm not gonna be able to afford this lifestyle. So called downstairs, and I said, hey, I'm gonna move out 30 days. Packed up all my stuff, put it in a U-Haul, and I saw LA in the rearview mirror, and I was like, what are you doing? And I had worked my entire life to get to this point, and I think it was safe to say I made it. And I was walking from that, and some guy just told me what I want to do is impossible. And I drove to Lake Tahoe. And it was one of the longest drives I've ever made. But I had a little cabin up here, and I figured this will buy me some time, and I can work on this. And I set a budget, and I gave myself a couple months to kind of get things going, and that budget went out the window, and those couple months turned into a couple years, but eventually I did make the giant plate. And one of the smartest things I did in doing so is I had a couple buddies of mine document the process, and we made a film called Silver Night. And in putting it out, I was really reluctant. I'm like, well, we're in the midst of the iPhone craze, and I'm working in the 19th century. I didn't think anyone was gonna watch it. And I was like, all right, I put it out. Within an hour, it had 100,000 views, and 200, whatever, 1 million. And I'm like, what is going on here? And then the influx of emails started coming in. I was getting hundreds and hundreds of emails, and I started going through them, and people were like, we want you to come here, photograph this, do this, we'll get you here. And I made a decision at that point, and I said, I want to photograph subcultures and sub-societies and people that maybe don't fit in, and maybe they aren't part of it. Maybe they don't even have a house, but that's what I wanted to do. And I started making these giant plates of these people. And slowly, these plates are ending up in museums. They're hanging next to Warhols and Monet and Rothko. And I'm like, I was really happy about that. And I looked at that, and I said, this is such an amazing way to honor someone's life and give someone a voice that necessarily wouldn't have it. And it started feeling like it was reflecting on me, and it was a piece of me. Maybe I was talking to myself. But I was very happy about it. And that brings me back to that original question. What would you be willing to sacrifice in order to have something you love? Perhaps the answer is love requires no sacrifice, but only the courage to reach out and grab it. Thanks.